well, gee, that's perfectly good intellectual property, and yeah, you can probably make some money from it, but can you build a company around it? Well, no, it's only a little piece of a functioning technology that's out in the marketplace already, and you're not going to be able to do that. So you need to make that determination, and I think you've got people around at the university and some of the supporting organizations that will help you make that assessment. Is this just a feature? And if it's a feature, fine, you can probably make some money from it by licensing it to whomever, but don't fool yourself that you're going to create a company around it. So that's another threshold item. Is it a product? So we've had a company that I saw an investor pitch on, which is a company, and this is science out of the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, and it was a salve for wound healing, for burns and stuff like that. And at the end of the investor pitch, the entrepreneurs are asked to leave the room so that the angels can talk about, well, is it thumbs up, we're going to invest, or thumbs down, not enough there. And here the problem was, they said, well, gee, this is what we call in the business a one-trick pony. This is a product, and it probably ought to be offered up to J&J or somebody who's in the consumer products area for like bacitracin or some of the other things that are out there. It's a product, it's not a company. Why would we invest in this? There's not enough here to really create a product around it. Of course, that's not always a legitimate analysis, because the last time I checked, Steve Jobs came up with a pretty good idea for computers that worked out okay for him, but that's something you need to be prepared to answer. Is there enough of a market potential for this that it's not going to be just a one-trick pony, a single product, and investors aren't going to get excited about it? So if you get all through those hurdles, and the ideal situation is you've got, and I'll use an example of a company that we were talking about a little before. A company that I worked with had 24 compounds, some of which were for a new generation of anti-infectives. Some were compounds that would just repotentiate existing compounds that had lost their efficacy because of the virus or bacteria mutating. And there, what they were able to do is pick a couple of compounds that had a very quick path to the marketplace. And the way the business plan read was, and this is what capital providers like to see, is, well, we're going to initially focus on compound X and compound Y, and oh, by the way, we can get to the market with those in 23 or 24 to 36 months. But oh, by the way, we have all of this other wonderful intellectual property with these other 22 compounds, and once we get into the marketplace with these things, we're going to be able to turn to some of the others that have a longer timeline, and we'll look to move those in the marketplace. And that's the way investors are thinking about these things. Are you focused on the commercial potential? And it's kind of the reverse application of the famous Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. A lot of the business or the slide presentations, the pitches, investor pitches that we see, spend 80% of their time talking about the science and 20% talking about the business. Well, if you're in front of capital providers, people looking to make money, guess what you ought to be doing? You ought to be spending about 20% of your presentation on the science and 80% on the business. And that's kind of a fundamental point that a lot of people don't focus on. And again, it all comes to, gee, can you really build a company around this? Or is it going to be a research project that I'm being asked to invest in? So as the first-time entrepreneur or faculty looking to enter into the entrepreneurial world, you really need to do I highly recommend do the soul searching ahead of time, because once you're in, you're in, and you need to be all in. You can't be halfway in, or you're not going to have a good ride, and you're going to have a very unsuccessful outing. And again, drive the point home that you really need to ensure that there's a market, and ensure that you understand the market, and where is your opportunity. How are you going to move that into the marketplace? Is there room in the marketplace? Why do you win and your competitors lose? And just digress on that point, one of the fatal things that you can ever do in an investor pitch is to say, we don't have any competition. It's lights out, you lose, you may as well pack up, don't go any further in your presentation. As soon as you said that, you as an entrepreneur have zero credibility in front of investors. There is always competition, even if it's a status quo, which is do nothing. But if you make that statement, your credibility as somebody who understands the commercial world and what it's going to take to create a company has just evaporated. As you are getting ready to launch, you've answered all these threshold questions. You have good IP, you have clean IP, it's sufficient. It's enough to build a company on. You've got 2 that you can move forward, 22 that you can move forward later. There's a lot there. You really need to start gathering around you people in what I call the venture development community. Here at Binghamton, you've got resources available to you. You probably know what those are better than I do, SBDCs. There are consultants. I'll give you an example of one that I'm working with now. There's a woman who was a consultant to the what's called the Virginia Center for Innovative Technologies, and she specialized in life sciences and very, very good science background and whatnot. She invested in a company that worked out quite well, and she's left the Center for Innovative Technologies, and now she's consulting to a number of startup life sciences and biotech companies. Excellent, excellent resource, because it's somebody who not only has scientific background, but as part of her job at the Center for Innovative Technologies, part of her job was to introduce entrepreneurs to, guess what, sources of capital. So that is the home run consultant, and we've got a couple of companies that client companies that I've introduced her into, and she's in the process of working out some comp arrangements to work part-time on their behalf, helping them answer all the threshold questions that I just ran through definitively, and then helping position them to go out and raise some capital. Very, very important that you start building out that network, figuring out what the resources. Nobody is smart enough to do this on their own. If you meet that person, please bring them to me, because in 20 plus years of doing this business, I've never met anybody who was smart enough to do it on their own. So you're going to need other people. So start that process early on. That ought to be part of what you're doing. The myth of the guy or gal that sits in the garage or the basement and figures out the next whatever. Not very true, especially now. And Mike will tell you the science has gotten much more complex, and you really do need a team approach. Something that we see, we have a species of legal work that you may or may not ever hear it referred to it this way, but we call it corporate divorce. And it's when people have gotten in bed with people who they shouldn't have to begin with. And you really need to be as diligent and as careful. And if you're a male, get your wife involved, because women have a set of radar that men don't, and have them meet who you're dealing with. And if there's a bad gut vibration, really back away from it. Don't let your brain override your gut, because if you're getting a bad gut check on somebody, chances are there's something off there. They've got bad motives, they've got some baggage, they've got a history or whatever. You need to really check more. Once they're in your business, it is really difficult to get them out. And we've got attorneys within our firm, we call them busted deals, and they're in a busted deal trying to extract the intellectual property and extract the founder and extract enough of the business to get a restart. And in the meantime, probably having to, pay off or litigate their way out of a bad relationship. So very, very important threshold stuff. Okay, so as true to my word, there is some legal stuff here. So, okay, we're all through all of the due diligence and done everything correctly. And so here's some pretty basic stuff. Why would you use a legal entity to begin with? Well, two reasons, or actually a number of reasons. One is limitation of liability. If you're starting a business, you don't want to put at risk any more than you are knowingly put at risk. If you set up a business as a sole proprietorship, all your assets are on the line for things that go wrong with the business, debts that can't be paid on time, people that you owe money, or employment-related problems. So that's kind of a very, very basic. You always want to limit your liability so that you know what you're getting into and what you're putting at risk. The other reason you want to do it is when you go out to raise capital, you're going to be giving up equity in the company. And this is, again, harks back to some of the other discussions we've had. So one of the things I run away from is the entrepreneur, whether it's an academician or a first-time person that says, well, I've got a, this is a $1 billion company, but I'm not going to give up any equity to anybody to get the company off the ground. Forget it. It's not going to happen. Use a legal entity so that you can take parts of the company, stock, preferred stock, limited liability company, membership interest, and you're going to be selling parts of the enterprise, those shares, be they in a corporation or a limited liability company. You're going to be selling that opportunity to people who invest in your company. So that's another reason. And one of the big reasons for using a legal entity. You can't do that, obviously, in a sole proprietorship. Continuity of the business venture. If you have a sole proprietorship and the entrepreneur gets hit by a bus, well, that's the end of the enterprise, and people aren't too excited about putting money into something that could go away that quickly. If you have a corporation or a limited liability company, notwithstanding whatever happens, the entity will continue on, and there might be, and probably will be, disruption to progress of the company going forward, but it does have a legal life of its own, separate and apart from the founders or any of the shareholders, so it will continue on. Choice of entity. Quick disclaimer here. So a lot of the textbook materials that you'll see will deal with this in terms of tax. Some of my best friends in the firm are tax lawyers. I look at it totally differently, and because of what I do, which is help companies raise money, I'm really looking at it as through a totally different lens. Is how much money do you need, how soon do you need it, and where are you going to get it from? And I'll just give you a real life example. If you walk into my office and say, and again, I'm going to assume you've run the traps on all the threshold questions, so when you're sitting in front of me, I'm confident that you really know what you're doing. And you say, okay, I am going to need $5 million within the next 12 to 18 months to start this venture. I will just immediately scratch off the list S Corporation. Well, I might leave S Corporation on, but I'll scratch off limited liability company, because I already know when you tell me that you're going to need institutional venture capital money, and if you are going to need institutional venture capital money, they will require you to be a C Corporation